West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So there are other legal cases that Donald Trump is dealing with, including the documents issue, the Mar-a-Lago documents, and there are new developments this week that Donald Trump might have participated in possible obstruction with some of those materials that were at Mar-a-Lago. During an interview with Fox News last week, Donald Trump was asked whether he would personally look through boxes of documents from his presidency while they were stored at Mar-a-Lago. Here's his response last week.
I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that. I would do that. There'd be
All right, let me move on.
Remember this.
Yeah.
This is the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. Do you know that they ended up paying Richard Nixon, I think, $18 million for what he had? They did the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. I have the right to look at stuff.
Willie.
You do?
Willie. Sean was tried to help
You're allowed to take stuff?
Meatball Don. He was trying. Oh, wait, that's Meatball Ron. Sean was trying to help Trump time and again. Okay, but I know you wouldn't do that. Sure I would. Okay, let's move. And then he goes, let's move on. Yeah. And he's like, no, I want to completely prove the federal government's case. And then he goes on and proves the federal government's case, which of course
You're not allowed to take stuff.
More relevant now, Willie, after the Washington Post story that broke this weekend.
If you're the prosecutor or the special counsel in this case, it's just clip and save these interviews. Clip and save. Some of it amounting to a partial confession. Remember, it was last September in a different interview with Sean Hannity when Donald Trump said you can declassify documents just by thinking about them. As former president of the United States, if he thought about them being declassified, then they in fact would be declassified. We should ask Chuck Rosenberg, as a former prosecutor himself, if you are the special counsel, if you are Jack Smith, what are you making of these interviews that Donald Trump is giving again, especially the ones to Sean Hannity?
You know, I was thinking, Willie, about when I was a federal prosecutor preparing for trial, I would literally have a manila folder, which I would label my cross-examination file. And every time I found a document or someone said something or something that I thought could be useful, I'd put it in that file. The file here would be enormous. I mean, as prosecutors, we collect stuff, we hold on to stuff, we never know exactly when we're going to need stuff. But Mr. Trump, from a prosecutor's perspective, if you're preparing for cross-examination, is a gift that keeps on giving. And so they're going to have a lot of information, a lot of clips, a lot of the things he's said to choose from, whether or not he gets on the stand, whether or not they ever get to use it. we'll save that question for another day. But prosecutors are always collecting a cross-examination file, and Mr. Trump can't help himself. He always talks about Mr. Trump, and that just makes the file bigger and bigger and bigger.
He just can't help himself. And I want us to play this clip again because, again, in light of the Washington Post reporting this weekend, it becomes even more relevant. Let's play this clip again in case you all, well, first of all, missed Donald Trump's confession, and two, missed Sean Hannity trying to move him along, and he just wouldn't do it because he was like going, no, I like my hand on the hot stove so much, I'm going to put the other hand on the hot stove. Run it, TJ.
I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that. I would do that. There'd be
All right, let me move on.
Remember this.
Yeah.
This is the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. Do you know that they ended up paying Richard Nixon, I think, $18 million for what he had? They did the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. I have the right to look at stuff.
I have the right to take stuff and look at stuff even after, as the Washington Post suggests, federal investigators and the feds try to get him back. And federal investigators, the Post reports, have new and significant evidence which shows that after the subpoena was delivered, Trump was rummaging through boxes of the documents in his home because, Elise, he wanted to keep certain things in his possession that the federal government said he had to return to them.
And Joe, this is where Donald Trump could really get in trouble because that's obstruction.
Right.
And he differentiates himself from other former officials who might have a claim of inadvertently removing classified documents and having classified documents in their personal possession by the fact that he doesn't make good and make amends, and he continues to try to obstruct the government's case. And so you have this case happening in New York City, which one Republican operative called the Mickey Mouse paperwork case. But then you've got the classified document case and how Donald Trump has taken it possibly to the next level if he hasn't been forthright with investigators. And then from there, also you've got Georgia and then E. Jean Carroll next month. So while today is a big deal, there's plenty of other legal action to watch with Donald Trump.
And Joe, people I talked to in Trump's orbit in recent days, offer sort of two sides to how they feel about Manhattan. Yes, they think this could be a short-term political benefit for Trump. They also acknowledge that, of course, Trump doesn't really want to be indicted. No one does. He's concerned. He spent his whole life trying to avoid criminal prosecution. Here it is. But they also acknowledge they feel like this is a matter that can be dealt with. They think more legal peril lies elsewhere. And certainly the two that they say to me they're most worried about, Georgia, which we expect we'll hear about in about a month's time, right. And then this one here, because, yes, it's about the differences between how Joe Biden and Mike Pence handled their classified document matters and this one. They cooperated. They returned the documents. Donald Trump did not. And they feel like there's a real vulnerability here for obstruction. And Jack Smith seems to be working his way up, in his investigation and closing in, although perhaps he could save the taxpayers' money and time by just DVRing Fox News and therefore present his case to the grand jury.
Right. You've got your confession. You don't need depositions. You don't need interrogatories. Just DVR Fox News at night whenever Trump talks, and you're in good shape. Chuck, I'm curious if you agree with those on the inside that Jonathan O'Meara has talked to. Of course, understanding that we still don't know what D.A. Bragg has. Everybody's been talking about this indictment being strong or weak. Being an embarrassment or being a final call to justice. We have no idea what this is going to be. So we lay that on the table right now, just like we don't know exactly what George is going to be, but we have an idea. Same thing with the documents case. Still looking at these things, do you agree with the assessment not only of people inside Trump world, but also with a lot of legal analysts that right now he seems, from the fact patterns that are laid before us in the media, incomplete, but the fact patterns laid before us in the media and the law in these jurisdictions, relevant jurisdictions, that the Georgia case and the documents case, particularly on the obstruction of returning the documents, seem to be the two cases that could provide Donald Trump the gravest legal peril.
Yeah, I think that's right, Joe. And remember, with respect to the documents case, when the FBI executed the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, they went forward on 3 predicate offenses. One of them at the time was obstruction, right? So the FBI had enough information at the time to include in the affidavit their concerns about obstruction. And as a prosecutor, that's something we always look for. First, because it's illegal, but second, because it also evinces a consciousness of guilt. There's no reason to move stuff or destroy stuff or hide stuff or counsel people not to tell the truth if you haven't done anything wrong. And so if you're trying to turn a weak case into a strong case for the government, obstructing justice is one way of doing that. So I agree generally that the case in New York seems less important. That doesn't make it weak. And I know that's something that Mika and I talked about a couple of days ago. It's not necessarily a weak case. The evidence could be compelling. It could be corroborated. There could be a lot of it. But in terms of charges, it's less serious. How do we know that? Well, for one, the underlying offense, and we'll see whether or not Mr. Bragg actually charges it, is a misdemeanor. By classification, a relatively low-level crime. If we see felony charges, and I expect we will, they'll probably be Class E felonies under New York state law. Again, a relatively low classification of felony. Doesn't mean these charges don't matter. It doesn't mean he won't be held to account. But I agree generally, Joe, with your supposition that the cases in Georgia and the cases under investigation by Jack Smith as special counsel are probably weightier.
It is Tuesday, the 4th of April of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Well, speaking of taglines, I don't know where this is going, but speaking of taglines, today is a day, isn't it? Yes, it is quite a day. Historically, of course, this is the tragic day on which Martin Luther King was assassinated 55 years ago. I remember it quite well. I was still in junior high. Maybe you were too. And I was in a local department store around the corner and a little bit up the road, Fifth Avenue is what it was called back in the day, in Roland Heights. Yeah. And I had ridden my Stingray bicycle because that's what I had. It was my bicycle of choice to deliver my papers, and I had quite a paper route. Regardless, I was at the store just milling about late afternoon, I believe. Regardless, I was in the store, and I remember my dad was at the university, Cal State Fullerton, teaching a class. And then I was not too far from where the television department was in this store. Yeah, I remember it well. I was actually trying to remember the store. I think it was Lloyd's department store in Roland Heights. And they had a TV department, and it was like in a strip mall type area, but it was the anchor store, so it had a much higher profile in terms of its pitched roof and stuff. So, but there was this commotion on the television. I don't know why. It caught my eye, so I got a little bit closer, and there was the news. Cronkite and Brinkley and others all speaking about And there wasn't too many either. There was only 3 channels back in the day. But being in Southern California, we had the local channels as well. So let's not forget about that. Regardless, the TVs were turned to the various channels in the area, and all of them were speaking about Martin Luther King getting assassinated. And, of course, Martin Luther King was our hero, wasn't he? So, and then I remember my dad getting home from teaching class, and he had not heard because he was teaching a class. And back in those days, you didn't have cell phones to get the latest info on the news. And generally then, students went into class and actually listened to the professor rather than having AirPods, an earbud, because we did have transistor radios. So you could have brought in a radio and put a little one earplug thing, earbud. Put that baby in, and you could listen to sports or any number of things. But, we didn't do that back then. We actually listened to the prof as they taught the class. Am I casting aspersions on today's students? I mean, my grandson was quite a student, so I suppose I could use him as an example of how they all are. But then I look at Florida. All right. Anyway, my dad had not heard, and there's only a few times I've seen my dad shocked, and that was one of them. And so that was a day 55 years ago. What else is happening today? Oh, yeah, we all know that Trump's going to be not indicted, arraigned. I keep making the mistake that it's indictment day. It's not really indictment. He's been indicted. I like to say that a good prosecutor can indict a ham seditionist like Donald Trump, and they did. So today's the arraignment. All right, how do you plead? He's going to plead not guilty to defrauding the state of New York for taxes and any other number of things. And I guess will the feds get in on this too? I don't know. Anyway, we still have the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit coming up. Oh, yeah, that's fake. Fake news. It's a witch hunt. And then, the document case at Mar-a-Lago, the top secret document case. And as we mentioned at the top there, in today's Joe and Mika, it looks like he was expecting to get paid. He misread the Presidential Records Act. The Presidential Records Act was created because of Nixon. Not to give Nixon $18 million. Where does he come up with this number anyway? My God. So he was going to hold these top secret documents hostage and sell them to the highest bidder. I keep telling everybody this. When it happened, when we heard about it. But apparently he confessed on Hannity that he was expecting to get at least $18 million because that's what they paid Nixon. Oh, God. And they're going to let him get away with that? His supporters love it. I suppose if you're in a nation of crooks, they're going to love to have a crook leader, wouldn't they? All right. This feels like some weird, dark, dystopian Victorian novel. What the hell happened? It is true. It's sort of like we walked through into Bizarro world in some way. Everything is ass backwards. Elevating a mobster to hero status? I don't know. I'm a diehard liberal, but at heart, I think I'm pretty much a Boy Scout, too. And that means I like to help old ladies across the street. I like to do good. In Romper Room. I wanted to be a good bee. Do good bee. We all wanted to be do-good bees. And then I became a Boy Scout so I could be a do-good bee and get a merit badge too. Actually, the reason I joined Boy Scouts is because I wanted to keep camping and doing all the things out in nature I had been doing growing up in Oregon. Moved to Southern California, nature was there, but you had to drive to it. Well, you had to drive to it. Well, actually, when we lived on the farm, we had a lot of nature around us, a lot of wooded areas, streams, rivers, bobcats. Yeah, we had bobcats. Had to be careful. Yeah. But, so I joined the Boy Scouts mostly for the camping. And I kind of put aside the militaristic regimentation of it. Though, it was kind of fun wearing a little uniform, marching around, doing salutes, getting merit badges. Do-good-be merit badge. I wanted a do-good-be merit badge. Well, that's what a Boy Scout is, a do-good-be. So at heart, that's why I thought that was an American ideal. I was wrong. Apparently mobsters, cheating your fellows, defrauding the government, etc., 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 assaulting women. I don't know. Exploiting people of color. I mean, give me a break. Not paying your contractors or your subs. Nobody gets paid. Including the mob, to the point that the Italian mobs... How is this guy still alive is what I don't understand. It used to be if you stiffed the Italian mob, they had some leg breakers. But then he ran to the Russian mob, and they're a little bit more, shall we say, hands-on in the way that they deal with issues, even more than the Italian mob. A lot of convenient coincidences like 5-story falls out of buildings. A lot of that going on. Regardless, this guy is elevated to hero status among his cult, and that is really what it is. Okay. What else is going on? Yeah, a little judge race for Supreme Court judge over there in Wisconsin. There's that going on, too. Apparently, the most amount of money spent on a judge election in the history of the United States. A lot of times, it was thought that maybe judges should not be running. But I don't know. Can't just appoint them either, huh? All right. Well, we as a democracy, representative democracy, by the way, no matter what the MAGA folk like MTG and Berbert say, we are a representative democracy, not a constitutional republic, because a constitutional republic is part of a representative democracy. Come on. Take a civics class, please. So we are a representative democracy, but it is all held together by gossamer-thin agreements amongst all of us. And when a mob, a criminal mob, decides that's not important, we don't accept that. We don't know about it, so we don't care about it. And this is how autocracies get a foothold, or more. And this is not just something that happened overnight. This has been in the works since, well, I don't know. Seems like there's a lot of folk on our side that got assassinated on the progression to where we are now. Lots. Okay, well, we do have that going for us. Makes us exceptional, doesn't it? Yes, it does. All right, what else do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe as we begin this fabulous Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays? Fabulous. On the rest of the menu, a lawsuit has been filed challenging Utah's abortion clinic ban. This next one really burns me up. Tennessee Republican lawmakers moved to expel 3 Democratic members for their role in the recent school children gun control protest at the state capitol. 3 little kids, 9-year-old kids, get slaughtered. And the school children in Nashville and all of Tennessee, actually, have had enough. And the good old boys in the Tennessee State House says, hold on now, young uns. We got to teach you a lesson. You know, these MAGA Nazis really want to teach a lot of kids a lot of lessons, don't they? Well, also, as we finish up in the Bistro Cafe, the Indiana Senate backed a GOP bill tightening mail voter rules. Yeah, it's not tight enough. They got to squeeze it out until there's no life left. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Indian opposition leader Rahul Gandhi avoids prison as he appeals his defamation verdict. And OPEC's surprise cuts in production is meant to benefit Russia at the expense of the U.S. and Europe. Right around the time some elections are coming up. Isn't that nice? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link there, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay those bills that are ever increasing, and all the other sundry costs that it takes to run this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting powerfully for over a dozen years now. So if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, buy us some coffee. It really does help us pay those bills and all those sundry costs I mentioned, and they are ever increasing. So thank you for your generosity, and thank you for your generosity in the future as well. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio on those platforms, and Tom takes care of those. So thanks, Tom. You can also follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I incidentally post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's and 10 minutes before showtime. So you can get to those show notes and links by following me on those media platforms. And that way you can read the actual articles. Yeah, that's right. That's what you can do. You can also follow the show on Twitter, since Twitter's still there and I haven't really done a show account yet for Mastodon and Spoutable, but I will. But you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Sam Metz. A Utah law that would ban abortion clinics has been challenged in state court by abortion rights advocates who argue it effectively prohibits abortion in the deeply conservative state. While abortions remain legal up to 18 weeks of pregnancy in Utah, the Planned Parenthood Association of Utah and the ACLU of Utah said at a news conference yesterday, Monday, that limiting abortions to licensed hospitals would dramatically reduce access to treatments, as roughly 95% of abortions in Utah are performed at clinics. Honestly, there's no realistic alternative locations for Utahns to continue to get this really essential health care, said Sarah Stotz, President CEO of Utah's Planned Parenthood affiliate. This law wouldn't just shift care to hospitals, as some politicians are cynically maintaining. In fact, it would functionally eliminate access to abortion in Utah, putting the lives and health of people at risk. Planned Parenthood and the ACLU's legal challenge asked the court to delay implementation of the law until courts rule on its legality. Republican Governor Spencer Cox signed the legislation last month after it cleared the Republican-led State House, where supporters argued Utah wouldn't need licenses for abortion clinics when courts rule in their favor and limit abortions to only exceptional and emergency circumstances. Still, the signing of the law set off a rush of confusion among clinics, hospitals, and prospective patients who were already navigating a raft of overlapping trigger laws and legal challenges in Utah. It is set to take effect on May 3rd, at which time abortion clinics will no longer be able to apply to be licensed. It would institute a full ban on January 1st of 2024 by stripping all clinics of their licenses. Those state officials have said clinic licenses will remain until then. Planned Parenthood attorney Hannah Swanson said confusing licensing provisions would force clinics to stop providing abortions on May 3rd, barring court intervention. She said Planned Parenthood was concerned about sections of the 1,446 line bill that it believes makes providing abortion a crime on that date. Republican lawmakers said last month that Planned Parenthood's claims about the legislation were inaccurate. In response to a question about currently licensed clinics, state health officials directed the Associated Press to licensing rules that do not require abortion clinics to pursue new licenses for the time being. Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby, the legislation's Republican sponsor, said the law was a byproduct of working with doctors and hospitals to strike the best balance of protecting innocent life and protecting women who experience rare and dangerous complications during pregnancy. Let the ladies die. The law has wide-ranging implications while the courts sort through legal challenges to other abortion restrictions passed by Utah lawmakers. Last year's U.S. Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe v. Wade triggered two pieces of legislation passed years ago, which were designed to go into effect should the court roll back the constitutional right to abortion. In 2019, lawmakers passed a ban on abortion after 18 weeks, and in 2020, a ban on abortions regardless of trimester, with several exceptions, including for instances where maternal health is at risk, as well as cases where rape or incest is reported to the police. Which, I gotta tell you, in Utah, they don't do that. Utah's Planned Parenthood affiliate sued over the 2020 ban, and in July, a state court delayed its implementation until legal challenges could be resolved. The 18-week ban has since been de facto law, though Stotz said on Monday that the clinic law would be tantamount to a full ban on abortions should it take effect. Kimberly Cruzy of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Tennessee Republican lawmakers took the first steps yesterday, Monday, to expel 3 Democratic members from the GOP-dominant House for their role in a recent gun control protest at the state capitol. The extraordinarily rare move resulted in a chaotic and fiery confrontation between lawmakers and supporters opposing the move and has further fractured an already deep political division inside the Tennessee legislature. Resolutions have been filed against Representatives Gloria Johnson, Justin Jones, and Justin Pearson after they led chants from the House floor with supporters in the gallery last Thursday. The resolution declared that the 3 had participated in disorderly behavior and did knowingly and intentionally bring disorder and dishonor to the House of Representatives. Republican Reps Bud Halsey, Gino Bulso, and Andrew Farmer filed the resolutions. They successfully requested yesterday, that the House expedite the process and vote on the resolutions this Thursday. Despite support from the Republican supermajority, their request sparked outrage among supporters watching in the gallery. Their loud cheers led House Speaker Cameron Sexton to demand that they be removed by state troopers. Also, during the turmoil, several lawmakers engaged in a confrontation on the House floor. Jones later accused another member of stealing his phone and trying to incite a riot with his fellow members. Sexton deemed Jones out of order and cut off Jones' microphone. Hundreds of protesters packed the Capitol last week, calling for the Republican-led State House to pass gun control measures in response to the Nashville school shooting that resulted in the deaths of 6 people. As the chants echoed throughout the Capitol, Jones, Johnson, and Pearson approached the front of the House chamber with a bullhorn. As the 3 shared the bullhorn and cheered on the crowd, Sexton, a Republican, quickly called for a recess. He later vowed the 3 would face consequences. Meanwhile, House Minority Leader Karen Camper described their actions as good trouble, a reference to the late U.S. Representative John Lewis's guiding principle. By Monday yesterday, Sexton confirmed that the 3 lawmakers had been stripped of their committee assignments and said more punishments could be on the way. A few hours later, House Republican Caucus Chairman Jeremy Faison referred to Jones as the former representative during the evening session. Pearson and Jones are both freshman lawmakers. Johnson has served in the House since 2019. All 3 have been highly critical of the Republican supermajority. Jones was temporarily banned from the Tennessee Capitol in 2019 after throwing a cup of liquid at former House Speaker Glenn Casada and other lawmakers while protesting the bust of Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest inside the Capitol. Expelling lawmakers is an extraordinary action inside the Tennessee Capitol. Just 2 other members have been ousted from the chamber since the Civil War. Tom Davies of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Republican-backed proposal that would require Indiana voters to submit more identification information to obtain mail-in ballots was endorsed yesterday, Monday, by the state Senate, despite objections from opponents that it would make voting more difficult for many people. Senators voted 36-12 in favor of the bill, which would require voters submitting a paper application for a mail ballot to include a photocopy of a government-issued identification card or at least 2 ID numbers such as their 10-digit driver's license or the last 4 digits of their Social Security number. You know, the Social Security number that's not supposed to be used for identification purposes. Yeah, that one. Supporters say the measure is aimed at increasing voter confidence in elections by putting Indiana's ID requirements for mail-in ballots in line with those for in-person voting. Opponents counter that the additional requirements may disenfranchise some people, especially older voters, who could find it difficult to navigate the additional requirements and those who are not able to print a copy at home of their driver's license or other photo ID. The bill is truly about making it more difficult for voters to vote, said Democratic Senator J.D. Ford of Indianapolis. We should be tearing down those barriers, not adding to them, Ford said. We already rank at the bottom when it comes to voter turnout, and this bill will just continue to exacerbate that problem. Of course, we all know that's a feature, not a bug. Back to the article. Bill's sponsor, Senator Eric Koch, a Republican from Bedford, yeah, that Bedford, said he believes Indiana's elections are safe and secure, but cited scattered criminal cases of absentee voting fraud across the state over the past decade. Oh, my God. The House approved a similar version of the bill in February. Both chambers will have to agree on an identical version by late April to send it to Republican Governor Eric Holcomb. Previous attempts at enacting tougher mail-in voting rules failed the last 2 years in the Republican-dominated legislature, even as Donald Trump and many of his supporters stoked false claims that fraud led to his 2020 election defeat. Voting rights groups maintain that stricter ID requirements are not necessary because county election workers already must confirm that a person's signature on an application matches their voter registration record. Some who testified before lawmakers in support of the bill argued that the current signature matching process is not stringent enough and that voters are screaming for tighter rules around mail voting. Well, we all know that's a lie. The only people screaming are the people who don't want people to vote. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
What grows in the forest? Trees? Sure. Know what else grows in the forest? Our imagination, our sense of wonder, and our family bonds grow too. Because when we disconnect from this and connect with this, we reconnect with each other and build family memories we will carry with us forever. The forest is closer than you think. Find a forest near you and start exploring at discovertheforest.org. It's easy. Just put in your zip code to find family-friendly outdoor destinations near you. You'll also find guides to free activities, games, and amazing forest facts. Give the magic of the outdoors to your kids and reconnect with your family. Find a forest near you at discovertheforest.org. That's discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi. Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I have to concede one point. Today's far-right Republican Party does not discriminate against women. In fact, the GOP is giving its female political buffoons a higher profile than its male bozos. Consider Sarah Huckabee Sanders, governor of Arkansas, who became a star in the new Republican crusade to bring back child labor abuse. Pushed by their corporate backers, GOP governors and lawmakers exclaim that the answer to America's so-called labor shortage is not to make jobs more attractive, but to fill them with cheap, compliant children. Huckabee Sanders rushed to the aid of these corporate powers, eliminating a bothersome Arkansas law that had required Tyson, Walmart, and other big employers to get a special state permit to put any child under 16 to work. The meddling hand of big government creeping down from Washington, D.C., she bellowed, will be stopped cold. We will get the over-regulating, micromanaging, bureaucratic tyrants off your backs. So she is using the meddling hand of big state government to creep into the lives of vulnerable children. She is not alone. Ohio's Republican-controlled state government is moving to extend the number of hours bosses can make children work. Iowa wants to let 14-year-olds work in industrial freezers and laundries, and Republicans in Congress have shrunk the number of investigators and lawyers policing child labor abuse, so abusive corporate managers know there is little chance they'll be caught. Most damning, these corporate politicians value children so little that they've set the maximum fine for violating the workplace safety of minors at $15,000 per child. For multi-million-dollar conglomerates, that devaluation makes it much cheaper to endanger children than protect them. This is Jim Hightower saying America should not even be talking about child safety rules in dangerous workplaces. It's shameful to have any children working there.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered by an assassin's bullet in Memphis, Tennessee. He was in Memphis to support AFSCME sanitation workers who were out on strike fighting for better wages and working conditions. In the later 1960s, Dr. King's organizing had increasingly turned toward addressing the poverty, unemployment, and unfair working conditions faced faced by black workers. As we pause to honor the memory and legacy of Dr. King today, let us take a moment to reflect on his words. In a message he delivered to a gathering of Teamster Local 815 shop stewards on May 2nd, 1967. In his speech, Dr. King discussed the wave of labor organizing in the 1930s. He recounted the difficulties faced by workers forging new unions. He said, "Yet there was one thing that was won, one thing that was fought for as indispensable, one thing for which all the pain and sacrifice was justified, namely union recognition. It seemed so minuscule a victory that people outside the labor movement scorned it as, in fact, just another defeat. But those who understood, union recognition meant the real beginning. Union meant strength, and recognition meant the employer's acknowledgement of that strength. And the two meant the opportunity to fight again for further gains with united and multiplied power. As contract followed contract, the pay envelope fattened, and fringe benefits and job rights grew to the mature work standards of today. All of these started with winning first union recognition. Dr. King died standing up with black workers fighting for that very recognition. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 34 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy conditions currently, with showers later on this morning. Highs in the mid to upper 40s, winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Looks like we might get something a little less than a quarter inch of rain throughout the day and through the evening. Cloudy skies overnight with lows in the mid 30s, winds light and variable. And then overcast tomorrow with highs in the low 50s, winds light and variable with showers in the afternoon. Pollen is still rated as none here in the town of Rogue River. I wonder if the weather station that takes care of all of this is broken and not registering the pollen count, because there's got to be something out there. Anyway, the air quality index for the region is in the good range at 22 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate at level 5, still pretty high. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.27 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 57 degrees and fair. Paris is 54 and sunny. Rome is 60 degrees, partly cloudy, with a forecast of lightning and thunder in the region that could affect critical electrical infrastructure. Kyiv is 40 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 50 and clear. Hong Kong is 76 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 55 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 62 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 46 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 61 degrees Fahrenheit and a sunny day for an arraignment. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kritika Patti of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A court yesterday, Monday, suspended a 2-year prison sentence for Indian opposition leader Rahul Gandhi as he appeals his criminal conviction for mocking the Prime Minister's surname, which resulted in his expulsion from Parliament, dealing a huge blow to his Congress party ahead of general elections next year. Gandhi, a fierce critic of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his main challenger in the 2024 polls, was ousted after a court sentenced him to 2 years in prison for defamation for a comment made in a 2019 speech. The prosecution of Gandhi, the great-grandson of India's first prime minister and scion of the dynastic Congress party, was widely condemned by opponents of Modi as the latest assault against democracy and free speech by a government seeking to crush dissent. The speed of his removal from Parliament shocked Indian politics. Gandhi appeared in court in the western state of Gujarat on Monday, yesterday, to file an appeal, and was granted bail for the duration of the appeal process. He was granted bail for 30 days to file an appeal when he was convicted last month. The court set the next hearing for April 13th. In this struggle, truth is my weapon and truth is my support, Gandhi tweeted after Monday's hearing. He waved to supporters and Congress Party members who gathered outside the court. A man who shares the Prime Minister's surname, Modi, which is common in his home state of Gujarat, accused Gandhi of defamation over a 2019 speech in which he asked, "Why do all thieves have Modi as their surname?" Gandhi then referred to 3 well-known and unrelated Modis in the speech: a fugitive Indian diamond tycoon, a cricket executive banned from the Indian Premier League, and the Prime Minister. The petitioner who filed the case is a member of Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party in Gujarat, but is not related to the Prime Minister or the 2 other Modis mentioned by Gandhi. Gandhi was convicted on March 23rd and expelled from Parliament the next day, sparking opposition lawmakers to rally to his defense and call his expulsion a new low for India's constitutional democracy.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
David McHugh of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Major oil-producing countries led by Saudi Arabia said they are cutting supplies of crude again. This time, the decision was a surprise and is underlining worries about where the global economy might be headed. Russia is joining in by extending its own cuts for the rest of the year. In theory, less oil flowing to refineries should mean higher gasoline prices for drivers and could boost the inflation hitting the U.S. and Europe. And that may also help Russia weather Western sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine at the expense of the United States. The decision by oil producers, many of them in the OPEC oil cartel, to cut production by more than 1 million barrels a day comes after prices for international benchmark crude slumped amid a slowing global economy that needs less fuel for travel and industry. It adds to a cut of 2 million barrels per day announced in October. Between the two cuts, that is about 3% of the world's oil supply. Saudi Arabia, OPEC's dominant member, said on Sunday that the move is precautionary to avoid a deeper slide in oil prices. Saudi Energy Minister Abdulaziz bin Salman has consistently taken a cautious approach to future demand and favored being proactive in adjusting supply ahead of a possible downturn in oil needs. That stand seems to be borne out as oil prices fell from highs of over $120 per barrel last summer to $73 last month. Prices jumped after Sunday's announcement, with international benchmark Brent crude trading at about $85 on Monday, up 6%. With fears of a U.S. recession exacerbated by bank collapses, a lack of European economic growth, and China's rebound from COVID-19 taking longer than many expected, oil producers are wary of a sudden collapse in prices like during the pandemic and the global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. Well, that's good news, I guess not. And it does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And you do know that Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. dans mon jardin d'hiver.